Taehyung cries as he hears a voicemail from his dead father. But Jungkook laughs, unaware of what's really happening. A haunting voicemail from Taehyung's late father shakes him to his core. So why is Jungkook laughing? Something is terribly wrong, and they're not alone. Episode 1. The voice that shouldn't exist. You heard that too, right? That was Appa. Taehyung's voice trembled as he stared at the screen. Across the room, Jungkook laughed, loud, clueless, like nothing had happened. The first crack of thunder came as Taehyung pressed play. Rain slicked the windows of the old countryside estate, where he and Jungkook were holed up for their latest project, a web documentary about haunted sites in South Korea. It was supposed to be entertainment, just lights, shadows, and tricks of the mind. Nothing was supposed to be real. But at 3:03 a.m., Taehyung's phone lit up with a voicemail from a number that didn't exist. The voice, rough, tired, and heartbreakingly familiar, spoke only one sentence. Taehyung, don't trust anyone, not even yourself. His blood ran cold. It was a voice he hadn't heard in 2 years, not since the funeral, not since the accident that was ruled a simple misstep on wet stairs, an accident that had always felt like a lie. He staggered backward, phone slipping from his hands, eyes wide with disbelief. Bro, what is it now? Jungkook called from the other room, chuckling as he adjusted a camera lens. Did one of the staff prank call you? Taehyung couldn't answer. His mind was already drifting back to that night 2 years ago. The argument with his father, the unresolved tension, the scream that never came, only a crash and then silence. The voicemail had ended, but the echo of that voice clung to his skin like cold fog. He picked the phone back up, hands shaking, played again and again. The sound didn't change. The fear inside him did. The house was an abandoned military hospital turned mental facility, tucked deep in the mountains near Gyeonggi. Its history was scarred with rumors, experiments in sound therapy, frequency exposure, unrecorded patient deaths. It was the perfect setting for clicks and views. But now, it wasn't content they were capturing. It was something else, something that had waited. Taehyung wasn't the only one haunted. He could see it in the way Jungkook refused to sleep alone, how he joked louder than usual, how his fingers twitched when he thought no one was looking. They were all running from something. For Taehyung, it was guilt. He told his father he wished he was dead. For Jungkook, it was something more, something he hadn't told anyone, not even himself. Later that night, long after everyone else had gone to bed, Taehyung sat on the wooden floor with headphones on, isolating the sound wave of the voicemail using his laptop. He had always been obsessed with frequencies, how a voice could carry memory, emotion, truth. He scanned the spectrogram, looking for anomalies, and he found one. Buried beneath the primary voice track was a low heartbeat, steady, slow, eerily familiar. He froze. He recognized that rhythm. It was the same pattern he'd heard in his father's old hospital scans, the same arrhythmia, and one could have known that. He closed the laptop, heart pounding as hard as the sound in his ears. Then he looked toward Jungkook's room, the door half closed, light still spilling from beneath it. Maybe he should tell him. Maybe Jungkook would understand. But something stopped him. At exactly 3:03 a.m. the next night, Jungkook's phone rang. No contact name, no number. Sleepy and annoyed, he picked up and pressed play on a new voicemail. It was a woman's voice. Older, shaky, familiar in a way that made his skin crawl. Jungkook, you can run as far as you like, but you know who pushed him that night? Jungkook's smile vanished. His hand dropped the phone. His breath hitched. No one knows about that, he whispered. Behind him, the camera, still recording, picked up a shadow that hadn't been there before, and the voicemail kept playing. Even though the phone had hit the floor, even though no one had pressed play, it kept playing. And somewhere in the static, two voices overlapped. Taehyung's and his father's, screaming the same name, Jungkook. To be continued. I never thought I'd hear his voice again. I never thought I'd want to. Taehyung's words lingered in the air, but Jungkook still didn't understand. The sun barely kissed the horizon, its weak light filtering through the cracked blinds. The old mansion groaned under the weight of its secrets, and the cold seemed to seep into every corner of the room. The night before, Taehyung had barely slept. the echo of his father's voice ringing in his mind. But the worst part wasn't hearing the voice. It was hearing it after so long and realizing that it wasn't supposed to be there. He had to get answers. But the one person who could help him was sitting right across the room, laughing like nothing had happened. Seriously, man, you're freaking out over a voicemail? Jungkook grinned, stretching his arms. I get it. This place is creepy, but it's just some prank. Maybe even a glitch in the recording software. We're in a haunted hospital, bro. This stuff happens. Taehyung clenched his fists. How could Jungkook not hear it? How could he not feel the weight of those words? The warning, the urgency. Without saying anything more, Taehyung grabbed his jacket and walked out into the hallway. The old wood creaked under his weight, every step echoing in the emptiness. His breath came in shallow bursts, his thoughts swirling in chaotic disarray. He needed to know more about the hospital, about the people who had been here before them. His father had worked in a similar facility, and it was no coincidence that the last voicemail had come from this very place. Outside, the air was thick with fog. Taehyung pulled out his phone again, his fingers trembling. The voicemail icon was still there, waiting, but he hesitated, staring at the screen. Should he really press play again? Should he continue to listen to the voice that should no longer exist? But something inside him urged him to do it. He had to understand. This time, he listened more carefully, dissecting every sound, every pause. As the message began to play, his father's voice sounded almost distorted, as if he were speaking through water, the words barely recognizable. Taehyung, you have to find the truth. They're watching. They'll come for you if you don't. The message abruptly cut off, leaving Taehyung in a cold silence. His chest tightened. Who is they? What truth? He turned around to head back inside, but as his fingers brushed the door handle, something caught his eye, something faint, barely noticeable, but a figure standing at the edge of the fog. Just standing there, watching him, his breath hitched. Jungkook, who had been following Taehyung out of curiosity, stepped forward, oblivious to the figure in the mist. Hey, you alright? You look like you've seen a ghost or something. But Taehyung couldn't answer. His mind was racing too fast, heart pounding in his ears. The figure is still there, unmoving, almost too still to be human. And then, as if sensing Taehyung's gaze, it moved. It wasn't walking, more like gliding, shifting through the fog as if it weren't truly part of this world. Taehyung's legs went rigid, his breath caught in his throat. He reached for Jungkook, but his words wouldn't come out. Jungkook, still oblivious, just laughed. Come on, man, it's probably just another ghost story the locals told us about. Let's get back inside. But before they could move, the figure stopped. It didn't make a sound, didn't even seem to breathe, but it was unmistakably there. In that brief moment, Taehyung saw the shadow's face. That it was his father's face, and then it vanished. Inside the house, the mood had shifted. Jungkook was quieter, but Taehyung didn't notice. His mind was on fire, overwhelmed by the image of the figure and the unsettling certainty that someone was following them. It wasn't just a haunting. It was something far worse, something personal. Jungkook was still flipping through his notes, unaware of the tension building inside Taehyung. His gaze darted back to the laptop screen, but every so often, his eyes flicked toward the camera, the one recording everything that had happened since they arrived. The footage. It was all still there, saved, untouched. But Taehyung wasn't sure what he'd see if he played it back. What if it wasn't just the footage of the team? What if there was more? Finally, Taehyung couldn't keep it inside anymore. We need to go deeper into the history of this place, he said, his voice almost a whisper, breaking the silence. We need to find out who used to live here, what they did. I don't think what's happening here is just some coincidence. Jungkook raised an eyebrow, but didn't respond right away. He could see the fear in Taehyung's eyes, and it unsettled him. He wasn't used to seeing Taehyung like this. Not the usually confident, playful guy, but someone shaking with uncertainty, someone trying to keep it all together despite the fact that everything felt wrong. All right, Jungkook finally said, running a hand through his hair. I'll help you look into it, but I think we're both in over our heads, man. The last words he spoke hung in the air, heavy with something unspoken, something neither of them wanted to face. As the day passed, the tension between the two grew. Every time Taehyung would catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of his eye, he would turn quickly, hoping to make sense of it. But there was nothing, just the feeling of being watched. And then, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Taehyung's phone vibrated again. It was another voicemail. This time, the number was different. Without hesitation, he pressed play. Taehyung, they're closer than you think. The truth about your father's death is buried here in the walls. His breath caught in his throat. But before he could listen further, the phone line went dead. The days blurred together, marked only by the constant ringing of Taehyung's phone. Each voicemail was a chilling reminder of the truth he couldn't escape. His father's voice, distorted and urgent, calling from beyond the grave. The messages were always cryptic, but they hinted at something far darker than a simple haunting. Taehyung, it's here. It's in the walls. You have to find it. The truth. Don't trust them. Don't trust anyone, especially Jungkook. Taehyung's nerves were unraveling. He couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. Jungkook, his best friend, noticed the changes. He didn't understand why Taehyung was so shaken by the voicemails. He dismissed it as nothing more than stress. That is, until they ventured deeper into the old hospital's basement one night, seeking answers. The basement was an eerie, forgotten place, filled with old medical records and journals. They found a journal hidden in a dusty corner belonging to Dr. Jang, a psychiatrist who had worked there long ago. Taehyung flipped through the pages, his blood running cold as he read about cruel sound experiments, attempting to unlock memories by amplifying fear. The mention of amplifying the mind's voices sent shivers down his spine. This was more than just a hospital. It was a place where horrifying experiments had been carried out. Then, on the last page, a name that froze Taehyung in his tracks. Kim Hyun, his father, a participant in the experiments, had been here in this very building. Taehyung's worst fears were starting to come true. The messages weren't just random warnings, they were connected to a terrible past. His father had been involved in something far darker than Taehyung had ever imagined. Jungkook, seeing the horror on Taehyung's face, was beginning to doubt his dismissive attitude. Wait, you're saying your dad was part of this? But why didn't anyone talk about it? He asked, confused. The truth was, Taehyung had never been told the whole story about his father's past, and now, it seemed, the past was coming back to claim them both. It was becoming clear that Taehyung's connection to this place ran deeper than he could have imagined. But their discovery didn't end there. As they ventured further into the basement, strange sounds echoed around them, whispers that seemed to come from the walls. The temperature dropped sharply, and the feeling of being watched intensified. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the distance, standing at the far end of the room. Taehyung's breath caught in his throat. The figure was wearing a white coat. It was his father's face. "Appa," he whispered, but before he could move, the figure was gone, as if it had never been there. Shaken, Taehyung could barely process what he had seen. Was it really his father, or was the hospital playing tricks on them? Jungkook, still skeptical, tried to shake it off, but Taehyung's fear was palpable. He could no longer deny that something was wrong here, something far worse than any ghost story. As the days went by, the messages continued. More voicemails, more warnings. Taehyung began to spiral, unable to escape the grip of his father's voice, now telling him things that made him question everything he thought he knew about his father's death. Jungkook isn't who you think he is. The truth is within him. He knows more than he's telling you. Taehyung didn't know what to believe anymore. The chilling revelation about his father's involvement in the experiments was bad enough, but the new message was even worse. What did it mean? Why was his best friend being dragged into this? He confronted Jungkook, unable to keep the suspicion inside any longer. "You know more than you're letting on," Taehyung said, his voice trembling. "What happened to my father? What did you do?" Jungkook's eyes widened in confusion. "What are you talking about? I haven't done anything." But Taehyung couldn't shake the feeling that Jungkook was hiding something. Was his friend somehow connected to the experiments? Could he be part of the reason his father's voice was still reaching him from the grave? The tension between them reached a boiling point when they found another disturbing clue. Jungkook's name in the journal. Taehyung froze. It wasn't a mistake. Jungkook's family had been involved in the hospital's early days in ways he never realized. And that's when it hit him. Jungkook wasn't just a bystander in this story. He was tied to it. The figure Taehyung had seen earlier wasn't just a ghost. It was a warning, a sign that the past wasn't done with them. There was something in the walls of that hospital, something dark, and it was calling Taehyung and Jungkook toward a fate they couldn't escape. The next night, Taehyung's phone rang again. Another voicemail. Taehyung, they're closer than you think. The truth about your father's death is buried here in the walls. He felt the weight of those words pressed down on him, his heart racing. The truth, what was it? What had happened to his father? And how was Jungkook involved? But before he could answer, the phone cut out. Silence. And then, the whispers started again. The hospital had become a prison, its walls closing in around them with every passing moment. Taehyung's father's voice echoed in his head, a haunting warning that only grew clearer. The truth was inside the recordings. But as the whispers grew louder, Taehyung realized that uncovering the truth would come at a terrible cost. In the basement, they discovered more than they could handle. A room with the very machines that had been used for the experiments, sound manipulation, fear amplification. The experiments had twisted the minds of those who were subjected to them, warping their memories, turning their thoughts into weapons. Taehyung could hear his father's voice again, distorted and desperate. It's too late. You're not ready. They're waiting. Don't trust him. The words cut through him like a knife. And for the first time, he began to question everything about Jungkook. His friend had always been the rock in his life, but now Taehyung was unsure. Jungkook, what do you know? Taehyung demanded, his voice shaking. You've been hiding something. Were you not telling me? Jungkook, normally the carefree one, looked at him with an expression of pure fear. Taehyung, I swear, I don't know what's happening here either. But this place, it's getting to both of us. They stood in the dark room, surrounded by strange devices that hummed with an eerie energy, but the whispers grew louder. A voice, familiar yet not quite right, spoke from the shadows. It's him. Jungkook. He's one of them. Panic swept over Taehyung. The walls seemed to close in, shadows stretching unnaturally around them. They had ventured too deep. The truth was too dangerous. And yet, despite all their fear, they couldn't stop. They had to know. The machines flickered, and the room filled with static before revealing a chilling recording. His father's voice, once again. Jungkook wasn't just a bystander in this story. He's one of the last surviving subjects of the experiment. The revelation hit Taehyung like a punch. Jungkook, his best friend, had been part of the experiments. He wasn't the innocent bystander Taehyung had always believed him to be. The connection was deeper than either of them realized. Shocked, Taehyung spun toward Jungkook, who looked just as stunned. No, that's not possible. I swear Jungkook's voice broke as he tried to deny it, but deep inside he knew. The truth was too painful to confront. The walls began to tremble, the hospital's eerie power growing as if it were alive, feeding off the fear and confusion that swirled between them. We need to get out, Jungkook urged, but Taehyung couldn't leave. Not yet. With a trembling hand, Taehyung pressed play on the machine. The recording resumed, revealing a horrific truth. Jungkook's memories had been manipulated by his own family. His parents were involved in the hospital's experiments, and he was part of a select group chosen to survive. His memories were a lie. Jungkook's entire life, everything he thought he knew, had been erased, reconstructed as part of the experiments. That Jungkook's face paled as he tried to comprehend the words, the truth shattering his identity piece by piece. But why? Why didn't I remember? He whispered that Taehyung's heart broke. He wanted to comfort his friend, but the weight of his own fear kept him at a distance. They did this to us, Taehyung said. They made us forget, and now they're making us relive it. The ground shook beneath them as the hospital seemed to awaken. The walls were no longer just walls. They were alive, part of the darkness that had consumed everything in this place. Suddenly, a voice spoke in their ears, loud and clear. You should have never come here. The experiment is complete. There is no escape. The lights flickered, and the hospital began to collapse around them. The darkness was no longer just a presence. It was a force pulling them into the void. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the walls seemed to bend, trapping them in the endless corridors of the past. Jungkook reached out to Taehyung, eyes wide with terror. "We have to leave now." But the hospital wasn't going to let them go. The very building that had witnessed the horror of the experiments now sought to keep its secrets hidden forever. The walls shifted, the ground cracked open, and Taehyung knew they were running out of time. They sprinted through the collapsing hospital, fighting their way through the chaos. The building groaned as if in pain, and the whispers, now louder than ever, pushed them forward. "It's not real. It's not real," Jungkook shouted, trying to convince himself. But the truth, as terrible as it was undeniable. The closer they got to the exit, the more the hospital fought to keep them. Doors slammed shut in front of them, and shadows stretched to engulf them. "We're trapped," Taehyung cried. Then, in a moment of clarity, Taehyung realized the only way to escape was to face the truth completely. He had to confront the past, the experiments, the voices. And so, without hesitation, he turned toward the heart of the hospital, the room where everything began. Jungkook followed him, despite his fear. They had no choice now. Inside, the final recording began, and Taehyung's father's voice filled the room one last time. "I did this to protect you, Taehyung. I am sorry, but you have to finish what we started." The walls fell away, revealing a pathway to the outside. They ran, not looking back, knowing that the truth, for better or worse, would haunt them forever. The hospital was nothing but a crumbling shell when they emerged into the light. The whispers, the experiments, the darkness, they were gone. But the memories lingered, carved into their souls. Jungkook and Taehyung stood in silence, knowing that some truths were too dangerous to forget. But they also understood the past was never truly gone, and the price of uncovering the truth was a burden they would carry forever.